There is a silence that speaks louder than words, not the silence of peace, not the silence of shared understanding, but the silence that arrives like a shadow slipping between two people. It begins so softly, you almost miss it. A message left unanswered, a glance that doesn't linger, a conversation that never finds its way back. Slowly, invisibly, the space between you grows heavier, and yet nothing has been said, nothing has been declared. Only the weight of absence remains, pressing quietly against your chest. This is not about words withheld, it is about what words can no longer carry. Carl Jung once taught us that what remains unconscious will shape our fate. And this silence, this quiet gap where intimacy used to live, is not emptiness. It is the unconscious speaking, it is the shadow rising, it is the unspoken made visible through absence, through detachment, through the sudden vanishing of warmth. Silence, you see, is never neutral. It is always communicating, but not in the language we are taught to listen for. A woman knows this silence in her body long before her mind names it. She feels it as the ache beneath her ribs, as the tightening in her throat when no answer comes, as the silent question blooming behind her eyes. Am I losing him, or am I losing myself trying to hold on? The pain is rarely about him alone. It is about the echo of something much older. It is about the wound of not being seen, of not being heard, of having to shrink to be loved. His silence awakens not just your longing, but your history. Neville Goddard offers us a mirror for this experience. He reminds us that reality is not shaped by circumstance alone, but by consciousness. His silence reflects his state: confusion, fear, immaturity, avoidance, but your reaction to it reveals something deeper. It reveals where you still seek validation, where you still hand your worth to the hands of another, where you still fear that without confirmation, you will disappear. His silence may not be rejection, but how quickly it touches the places within you that believe it is. The truth is that silence is magnetic. It pulls from you the energies you have yet to claim, the ache for recognition, the hunger for reassurance, the desperate hope to be chosen. But beneath all this noise, there is a deeper invitation, not to decode him, not to chase clarity, but to listen, truly listen, to what rises in you in the absence of words. Because this silence is not punishment, it is revelation. Carl Jung knew this well. He wrote that everything unexamined returns as destiny. The question is not why he falls silent, but why you cannot bear it. What longing does it awaken? What fear does it magnify? What forgotten part of you still waits to be rescued by someone else's presence? Silence is not a void, it is a mirror. What you see reflected depends entirely on where you are standing within yourself. In this mirror, you will not only see him, you will see yourself, your patterns, your fears, your attachments, your stories about love, about abandonment, about what it means to be chosen. And this is where healing begins. Because the deeper question is rarely asked aloud. Not what does his silence mean, but what does my reaction reveal about the frequency I inhabit, about the wounds I still carry, about the expectations I have wrapped so tightly around another's ability to love me, right? This silence reveals not just his feelings, it reveals your own. It reveals where you are still looking outward for something only found within. It reveals the places where you confuse absence with unworthiness, where you mistake distance for rejection, where you still believe love must speak loudly to be real. And yet, the greatest truths often arrive wrapped in silence. Silence asks you to stop reaching outward and start listening inward. Silence asks you to notice the places where you abandon yourself while waiting not to be abandoned. Silence asks you to remember who you are when no one else is watching, when no one else is answering, when no one else is choosing you but you. In this silence, there is an invitation, not to fix him, not to chase after clarity, but to return home to yourself, to meet the parts of you still waiting, still hurting, still reaching for someone else's words to make you whole. This is not about him. It never was. This is about the woman you are becoming. The woman who no longer confuses someone's inability to speak with her own lack of worth, the woman who knows that her value is not diminished by someone else's silence. Because there comes a time when you stop waiting for words, you stop craving answers, you stop begging the silence to change, and instead you listen, not to him, but to yourself, to the parts of you that are finally ready to come home. There are silences that hurt more than words ever could, not because they are cruel in themselves, but because of what they awaken in you. His silence touches something old, something fragile, something hidden beneath layers of strength and independence. It presses against the invisible place where, long ago, you learned to survive by becoming unseen. You learned to read a room without speaking. You learned to anticipate needs without asking. You learned to keep yourself small so as not to disturb the fragile bonds of acceptance. And so now, when he goes silent, it is not just his absence you feel. It is the echo of every moment in your life where your presence was met with indifference. It is the awakening of the invisible girl within you, the one who learned to measure her worth by the crumbs of attention she received, the one who believed she had to earn love by disappearing just enough to be tolerated, but never enough to be remembered. There is a reason his silence cuts so deep. It speaks directly to the archetype of invisibility that lives within so many women, the woman who has spent her life tending to others, healing others, loving others, and who now finds herself unseen, unheard, untouched by the very intimacy she so generously offers. His silence is not just his silence. It is a mirror reflecting back to you all the places where you have learned to make yourself smaller than you are. You may tell yourself it is about this man, about his withdrawal, his detachment, his failure to communicate, but beneath that story lies a deeper truth. His silence is awakening the silent parts of you, the parts that learned long ago that love is something you chase, something you earn, something you cannot hold on to unless you are willing to abandon yourself first. What feels like rejection may in truth be his own immaturity, his own inability to sit with discomfort, to face the mirror of your presence. Not all silence is intentional harm. Sometimes it is the product of emotional illiteracy, of wounds he has yet to face within himself, of patterns he does not even recognize as patterns. His silence is rarely personal, but it always feels that way because it touches what is still unhealed in you, and yet there is a danger in trying to interpret his silence as a code to be broken, in believing that if you understand it, you can somehow control the outcome, that if you stay silent enough, patient enough, loving enough, he will eventually speak. But love does not grow in soil watered by waiting, and presence cannot thrive where absence becomes the only language. The confusion you feel is not weakness. It is the tension between the woman you are becoming and the girl you once were, the girl who longed to be chosen, the woman who is learning to choose herself. Between them, there is this silence. And in this silence, there is a choice, not about him, about you, about how you will meet yourself in the absence of answers. Because you see, his silence may not be about you, but your response to it always is. It reveals what you still hunger for, what you still fear, what you still chase outside yourself. His silence brings your own shadows to light, the abandonment wound, the rejection complex, the invisible girl still waiting to be seen. And this is not punishment. This is an invitation to finally turn toward her, to finally listen to what she has carried all these years. The pain is real, but it is not new. It has been with you longer than he has. His silence is simply the latest chapter in a story you are finally ready to rewrite, not by forcing him to speak, but by no longer needing his words to validate your worth. There are silences that do not belong to the present moment. They carry within them echoes from far before this man, this story, this relationship. His silence may seem new, but the ache it provokes is ancient. It reaches down into the roots of your being and touches the part of you that learned long ago to fear abandonment, the part of you that equates silence not with peace, but with punishment, not with space, but with threat. What hurts is not merely his absence. It is the inner child within you who remembers what it felt like to be left alone in a room, to wonder why affection vanished without explanation, to believe that love disappears when you stop earning it. That child does not reason. She feels. She reacts. She panics at the void because the void once meant danger, disconnection, exile from warmth. And so you try to fix it. You reach out. You explain. You apologize for things you did not do. You walk on the same eggshells you thought you had left behind. Not because you are weak, but because something in you still believes that breaking the silence will bring back the love. Something in you still hopes that if you just say it right, act right, soften enough, he will return to you with words. But this cycle is not about him. It is about the wound. Neuroscience has shown us how the brain links silence to threat. In moments of perceived rejection, your brain triggers old survival patterns. Cortisol rises, anxiety spikes. Dopamine, the chemical of longing and reward, creates loops that trap you between craving and despair. You check the phone. You rehearse conversations in your mind. You rewrite reality in search of reassurance. And still, the silence remains. Why? Because the silence is not his responsibility to break. It is your invitation to meet what lives beneath your need for sound. To meet the part of you that cannot tolerate emptiness without slipping into fear. The part that confuses absence with loss. The part that has been waiting all these years for someone to come back and prove her worthy. But what if you no longer needed anyone to fill that space? What if the silence could become sacred rather than threatening? What if you could sit with it long enough to hear not the absence of his words, but the presence of your own neglected voice? This is not about becoming cold or distant. It is not about pretending you do not care. It is about creating inner security so profound that no external silence can shatter it. About learning to hold yourself in the gap between connection and disconnection. About recognizing that your worth is not confirmed by response, but by presence, your own. Imagine this: 3 steps, not rules, not strategies, just gentle movements inward. First, place your hand on your heart. Feel its rhythm. Notice that you are still here, still breathing, still alive. Second, whisper to yourself, I am not abandoned. I am not forgotten. I am returning to me. Third, allow yourself to sit in the discomfort without running, without fixing, without chasing. Let the silence stretch. Let it speak, not of him, of you. Because here is the truth. Your mind may reject what your heart longs for. You desire connection, yet you vibrate in lack. You seek love from those who cannot offer it, because somewhere within you still believe you must earn it through endurance, through waiting, through proving. But love, real love, does not demand that you shrink to fit into someone else's silence. It invites you to expand until you no longer fear the space they refuse to fill. His silence is not yours to solve. It is yours to transcend. There are silences that say more than any sentence could ever hold. Silences that echo through the body, not because of their volume, but because of their weight. A weight that presses against your chest, makes you question your worth, makes you wonder where you disappeared in someone else's story. And yet, often, what feels like erasure is not truly about you at all. Silence is rarely neutral, especially in relationships. It carries within it the unfinished conversations, the fears unspoken, the vulnerabilities unacknowledged. It speaks in the absence of calls, in the messages left unanswered, in the sudden chill of someone who was once warm. But what we forget is that silence often belongs to the one who cannot bear to speak, not to the one who waits for words. It is easy, so easy, to believe that his silence confirms your worst fears, that you are not loved, that you were never enough, that his absence must mirror your lack. But these are stories the wounded heart writes when it cannot access the truth. And the truth is more complex. The truth is that silence often comes not from cruelty, but from confusion, from fear, from the inability to face what lives beneath the surface of affection. Some men do not know how to speak what aches within them. They withdraw, not because they want to punish you, but because intimacy terrifies them. Vulnerability feels like exposure, and exposure feels like danger. So they retreat into silence, into work, into distraction, into anything that spares them from confronting the tenderness you evoke. This is where the misunderstanding lives. You interpret his quiet as rejection. He experiences it as self-preservation. You crave words to soothe your doubt. He lacks the language to name his own. And so you wait for a sign that may never come, not because he does not feel, but because he does not know how to feel out loud. There is a myth worth dismantling here. If he loved me, he would speak. But love does not always come wrapped in eloquence. Sometimes it hides behind defenses so old they have become instinct. Sometimes it is tangled with shame, with unresolved wounds, with shadows too dense to name, and fear silences even those who care. So how do you know? How do you read between the absences, discern whether his silence holds apathy or struggle? Pay attention not only to what he withholds, but to how he shows up elsewhere. Does he pull away from life, from himself, as well as from you? Does his silence extend beyond you, into his friendships, his passions, his very sense of self? Or is it precise, targeted, a tool of control, cloaked as withdrawal? There are clues, subtle but certain. A man who is lost within himself often withdraws from more than just you. A man who is manipulative withdraws to provoke a reaction. These are not the same silences. One is rooted in personal struggle, the other in unconscious games. Both hurt, but only one invites compassion without compromise. Silence then becomes less about him and more about you. How will you meet it? With anxiety or with inquiry? With fear or with understanding? With desperation or with dignity? His silence can teach you where your boundaries begin, where your needs deserve voice, where your self-worth must anchor itself deeper. Because when silence speaks louder than words, it is asking you to listen differently, not outwardly, inwardly, to listen to the spaces within you that still seek validation through someone else's presence, to the places where emptiness feels unbearable because you have yet to fill them with your own certainty. In the end, silence is not the enemy. Misinterpretation is, reaction is. Abandoning yourself to chase clarity from someone incapable of offering it, that is where pain multiplies. But meeting silence with self-possession, with curiosity, with the quiet strength of a woman who no longer fears absence, that is where freedom lives. There is a silent thread that connects every woman to her deepest wounds, a thread that often tightens when faced with the silence of a man, not because of what he says or doesn't say, but because of what his absence awakens within her. In that silence, something ancient stirs, an old fear of being left, a hunger to be chosen, a desperation to control what cannot be controlled. When a man withdraws, it's not only his presence that disappears, it's the certainty she thought she had, the story she believed was safe, the expectations she built quietly in the corners of her heart. And when those dissolve, she is left not only with his absence, but with her own discomfort, the discomfort of facing how much of her peace depended on his nearness. This is the test, not of his feelings, of your frequency. His silence exposes the hidden layers of attachment you carry beneath your calm surface, the parts of you that still crave answers, still seek reassurance, still wish to hold on to something, even when that something is slipping through your hands. Control is a quiet force. It hides beneath the need for closure, beneath the urgency for dialogue, beneath the questions you rehearse in your mind. Why did he change? What did I do wrong? When will he come back? Control is not always loud. Sometimes it speaks through your attempts to hold space where none is being offered, to hold on to what no longer wishes to stay. But there is a deeper truth moving beneath the surface of these dynamics, a truth that whispers of surrender, not surrender to him, to the situation, to his silence, but surrender to yourself, to the understanding that not every silence is meant to be broken. Not every absence needs filling. Some are meant to reveal what you have not yet learned to hold within. Silence is not passive. It moves energy. It reveals fractures. It invites recalibration. Carl Jung spoke of how what we resist persists, and often, the more we resist the silence, the more we push, question, grasp, the more it grows. Not because it holds power over us, but because we have not yet reclaimed the power we give away when we seek validation outside ourselves. Gregg Braden reminds us that the field responds to coherence, not to anxiety. What this means, in the language of the heart, is simple. The universe echoes back the state you embody. If you meet absence with fear, you deepen the vibration of lack. If you meet it with trust, with surrender, with the quiet assurance of your own worth, you shift the field. You shift yourself. In this space, a question arises. Who are you when no one answers your call? Who are you when silence becomes the only response? Are you diminished, undone, unworthy? Or are you still whole, still sovereign, still sacred in your solitude? His silence is not the cause of your disquiet. It is the mirror reflecting back where you still hold yourself in fragments, where you still tie your peace to the actions of another, where you have yet to claim the depth of your own center. Use this moment not to fix him, not to decode his mystery, but to fortify your own ground, to listen inward, to soothe the parts of you that still believe love must be proven through words, through gestures, through presence. The love you need now is not his, it is your own. The silence you fear can become the space where you meet yourself more honestly than ever before, where you notice the places you have abandoned within, where you retrieve the pieces you once gave away. This is not weakness. This is the sacred alchemy of becoming, of transmuting absence into presence, of learning that control was never love's true language, that surrender is not defeat, but a return to the only certainty you ever needed, your own. There is a place where silence breathes more deeply than words ever could, a place untouched by urgency, untouched by explanations. The forest knows this place well. In the forest, nothing forces itself to be seen. The tree does not explain its roots. The flower does not justify its bloom. The soil does not apologize for its darkness. Everything simply is, present, whole, enough. The forest exists in a sacred agreement with time. It grows slowly, quietly, beneath the noise of the world, beneath the footsteps of those who come and go. Something steady unfolds, a rhythm untouched by human anxiety, a wisdom far older than our questions. In this silence, life is not absent. It is profoundly alive. It is in this quiet, this absence of noise, that the deepest truths are revealed. When a man goes silent, he becomes his own forest, not because he holds secrets you must uncover, but because he holds wounds you cannot reach. His silence is not a void you are meant to fill. It is a terrain you are meant to respect. In this forest, you do not build fires to warm yourself. You learn to sit with the cold. You learn to listen with more than your ears. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And in this context, the more you resist his silence, the more you demand words, explanations, reassurances, the more his silence deepens, not as punishment, but as reflection, as invitation, to see where you are still at war with uncertainty, to see how you have confused noise with connection, words with love, presence with peace. Silence is not absence, it is fertile ground. In the stillness of the forest, new life stirs beneath the soil long before it becomes visible. In the stillness of his silence, your own truths begin to surface, the ones you have buried beneath your longing, beneath your questions, beneath your fear of being left unseen. There is a power in not rushing this process, in allowing the silence to reveal not him, but you, your needs, your patterns, your attachments, your resilience, the woman you are without his words to shape your story. This is the space where you learn the difference between waiting and wasting, between hoping and holding, between love that binds and love that frees. Spiritually, silence is a mirror. It shows us where we grasp, where we cling, where we forget our own enoughness. It reveals the places we have yet to trust. Not trust in others, trust in ourselves, trust in the unfolding of life, trust in the seasons of love, even those that seem barren. The forest does not fear winter. It knows spring returns in its time. It knows that beneath the frost, roots grow deeper. It knows that silence is not death. It is preparation, transformation, the becoming of something unseen. And so it is with you. The silence you face now is not punishment, it is passage. Through it, you will hear not only the absence of his voice, but the presence of your own. Through it, you will see that you were never waiting for his words to complete you. You were waiting to remember that you were complete all along. The ones who master their own silence no longer beg for noise. They listen differently. They live differently. They love differently. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from a place of deep, unwavering knowing, from a place that understands. The forest never needed applause to keep growing. Neither do you. Silence, when seen through the right lens, becomes an oracle. It speaks not only of absence, but of presence, of what lies beneath the surface of our perceptions and fears. When he goes silent, it is not just his feelings that are revealed, but a reflection of your own inner landscape. In the quiet, you hear more about yourself than about him, more about your patterns, your wounds, your fears, and your strength. Joe Dispenza teaches us that the quantum field responds to our inner coherence. When we react to silence with fear, with anxiety, with need, we inadvertently reinforce the cycle of disconnection. But when we meet silence with calm, with presence, with self-possession, we shift the energy. We break free from the old loops that keep us bound to lack. Carl Jung called the path of growth the process of individuation, a journey into the unknown, a crossing of deserts where certainty disappears and only faith in oneself remains. This desert is filled with silence. It asks you to endure the not knowing, to embrace the void, to become comfortable with ambiguity. It is in this space that you begin to find yourself, whole, sovereign, and awake. His silence revealed his feelings, yes, but more deeply, it revealed who you have yet to become. A woman who no longer waits for his voice to confirm her worth. A woman who knows that her presence is enough, that her frequency is powerful, that her inner world is her sanctuary. The real invitation is not to decode him, but to tune into your own frequency beyond his absence, to listen to the quiet voice within that holds your truth, to walk through the silence with courage, with grace, and with the steady knowing that you are not incomplete, you are becoming. And if what you have been missing all along is not the sound of his words, but the deep, resonant presence of your own being, then this silence is not an ending. It is the beginning of your most profound love story, the one with yourself.